Fish hooks dangled from the wall, each with its own story, its own purpose once fulfilled. Nearby, a weathered penny from 1971 lay on the table, a relic of a time long past. Its value had diminished over the years, but it still held a certain charm, a connection to history. Beside the penny was an item that had seen better days. Bent and warped, it seemed insignificant, lacking the weight of value. It could have been a fragment of jewelry, an ornament that had met its demise against unyielding rocks. The question lingered. Why engage in this ritual? What drove me to stand here in the rain, embracing the elements? Perhaps there was an inexplicable fondness for the intoxicating blend of seaweed and salt carried by the breeze. Maybe it was the satisfying crunch of wet sand underfoot, a sensory delight. Even with sturdy shoes and thick woolly socks, the sand inevitably found its way between my toes. This beach held no treasures of grandeur. It was a haven for trinkets and discarded novelties. Years had passed since the exhilarating discovery of a silver coin in 2008. The occasional musket ball surfaced since then, yet nothing of profound worth emerged. The act of kneeling down was often accompanied by a familiar pang of anticipation, a wary readiness for disappointment. Yet here I stood, persistently scanning the expanse of sand and stone, grasping my detector with determination. Alas, the outcome remained unchanged. No remarkable discoveries awaited. This terrain had been meticulously combed, not by fellow enthusiasts but by my own hand, painstakingly traversed over countless seasons. The beach was no idyllic sunbathing spot. It was a landscape where the towering cliffs overshadowed the narrow margin of sand that interposed between rocky terrain and the relentless ocean. Above, seagulls rode the currents with casual grace, while below the gusts were potent and the waves unrelenting. In the distance, white-crested waves surged vehemently towards the shoreline, collapsing just shy of my position. They retreated, their energy spent, caressing decaying seaweed and stubborn boulders. Amidst this spectacle, solitude reigned as I stood amidst giants. A fleeting impulse prompted me to remove my headphones, exposing myself fully to the forceful winds. My senses reeled, assaulted by the tempestuous gales. Eyes teared up from the sting, and I surveyed the path behind me, a reminder of my journey. When I initially set out, there was an elderly gentleman taking a leisurely stroll, but his presence has now vanished. It won't be long before the advancing tide obliterates the path back. This beach isn't frequented by the general public, particularly families. Occasionally, nudists opt for this spot in the winter, dashing into the waters with shouts and laughter, a mixture of excitement and amusement. These retired individuals who choose to be unclothed are drawn here for a reason akin to my own. It's not ideal for swimmers, bathers, surfers, or any water-related activities. The treacherous rocks pose a hazard. The forceful geography funnels riptides, and these natural currents have claimed numerous lives. It's prudent to conduct research before taking a plunge, but with the right preparations, safety can be assured. The towering cliffs provide an appealing shroud of privacy, accessible only to those familiar with the region. Most are oblivious to the existence of the rocky path leading down to the shoreline. This enclave is one of the world's forsaken and overlooked corners. I ponder why I still linger here after spending the afternoon in pursuit of something far from comfort and warmth. The journey back to the car is considerable. I can already envision the sensation of holding a cup of tea with both hands, the symphony of wind assaulting my mobile abode. I'm on the brink of concluding the day and heading home, content with the thought when a glint captures my attention. It sparkles on the sand, not too distant from me. As I approach, anticipating debris, perhaps a crumpled piece of foil, I retrieve the object and trace its contours with my fingertips. My thoughts proceed at a pace akin to a glacier. It's a gold coin. To the touch, it's cold, fashioned by hand, and predates the Saxon era. The archaic visage imprinted on its metal is peculiar, distorted by the passage of time. It resembles a figure with the mouth of an anglerfish. It's exquisite. It encompasses everything I've ever desired. Solid gold, heftier than a smartphone. The equivalent of 6 months' rent nestled in my palm. I didn't even need my metal detector. Right there atop the sand it lay. It likely emerged from the water, deposited here by the ferocious waves. In my mind's eye emerges an image of a sunken shipwreck, perhaps a mile or two off the coastline, its waterlogged chambers brimming with coins identical to this one. Clusters of gemstones encrusted with silver and gold, an age-old treasure that has at last been set free after centuries of battle with the tides. This could imply the presence of more. I glance around, taking in the expanse of shale and sand that surrounds me. 100 meters in the distance, where the terrain of rocks becomes increasingly difficult to navigate, another sight captures my attention. In the sunlight, there's a glimmer, though it could simply be a rock pool reflecting the sun's rays. Despite the thought that crosses my mind, urging me to head back, I continue scanning the beach. The relentless advance of the sea is evident. Behind me, the sandy shore has dwindled to a mere 10 meters in width. I'm well aware from past encounters that this strip of land will vanish faster than one can conceive, leaving behind only water and towering cliffs. If I'm ensnared by the encroaching waves, the best outcome I can hope for is to find a way to clamber to safety, awaiting a rescue, potentially from a helicopter, while my predicament becomes the talk of the town, splashed across local newspapers. Such incidents occur at least once every year. However, the stakes are far weightier than they might seem. Acquiring one more coin would secure my rent for an entire year. Once again, the image of a submerged chest brimming with treasures flashes through my thoughts. I chastise myself for indulging in such absurdities, dismissing them as the fancies of a child's imagination. Yet here I am, gripping a piece of evidence that contradicts my skepticism. An actual gold coin. How frequently in my life have my fantasies translated into reality? I clutch the gold coin, pressing my fingers into it with all my might, verifying its authenticity. How many times must a fantasy materialize to justify its significance? Just once, I whisper, my words carried away by the wind. The task ahead is far from effortless. The rocky terrain is jagged and hazardous. I reminisce about my childhood, when my mother first brought me to this beach. In those days, I envisioned the rock formations as the imprints of a giant's fingers. I would glide along the ridges, my feet arching like a spinning top, moving effortlessly across the peculiar landscape. Some of the crevices are deep, spanning 3 or 4 feet. A fall would undoubtedly have inflicted pain, but back then I remained sure-footed. I was young, virtually invulnerable. But things have changed. Perhaps it's my aging knees, maybe it's fear, or possibly a concoction of nerves. But my balance falters each time I raise a foot, my body struggling to stabilize on ridges as narrow as a pencil. I stumble twice, the second tumble delivering a searing pain. My jeans are torn, my skin is grazed, and blood starts to flow. The sensation of the wound takes a good 30 seconds to fully register. Clenching my teeth, I summon my determination. Glancing behind, I realize that the sand has vanished entirely. Turning back now would mean soggy socks and shoes wading through ankle-deep water, a prospect that would be deeply humiliating. As my gaze returns to the gash on my leg, I watch as the blood mingles with the salt water, its crimson hue gradually fading to a pinkish-yellow tint. Another golden coin comes into view. Any thoughts of retreating fade as I fumble for it in my grasp. My desire intensifies. I yearn not just for this solitary coin, but for the entire chest of treasures. I fantasize about running my fingers through the gold as if it were a liquid, even plunging my arms elbow-deep into the wealth I can't help but envision. However, the tide looms nearer. It's here now, raging waves almost reaching my position. I'm left with no choice but to settle for what I have. 2 coins, equivalent to a year's rent. I reluctantly accept this compromise and start to make my way back. Suddenly, a massive wave crashes upon me, its impact surpassing any blow I've ever endured. This force is mightier than any boxer's punch, capable of shaping continents, and it has me ensnared in its unrelenting grip. The duration of the following moments becomes a blur. There's salt, spray, and foam. I'm tossed around in a manner entirely foreign to me, akin to a roller coaster devoid of its tracks. Rocks collide with my body, ribs and ankles take the brunt. Something snaps, darkness consumes me, then light emerges. I'm certain of one thing, I'm on the brink of death. Regaining consciousness, I feel my lungs desperately gasping for air as I lie on my back. For a brief instant, I'm reduced to a primal being, embracing the sensation. But then reality rushes back in, the tide, the shore, the coins. I hoist myself up and gaze at my palm, which has clung so tightly to the coins that I must consciously will my fingers to unfurl. As expected, the golden coins remain nestled there. A laugh escapes my lips, but it's stifled by the agony that ensues. In mere seconds, I'm confronted with three harsh truths. First, my ribs are fractured. Second, my ankle is broken. Third, I'm about to vomit. The salty expulsion pales in comparison to the searing pain in my ribs and ankle as I struggle to turn onto my side. The act of vomiting leaves me sobbing involuntarily. This level of pain is entirely new to me. I manage to expel 4 feeble heaves of seawater and bile before collapsing, utterly breathless. My chest feels like it's filled with gravel. After several long breaths, I sit up, secure the coins within a pocket with a zipper, and survey my surroundings. I become aware of the surreal environment. I'm sprawled on a flat rock at the entrance of a cave. Evidently, I must have been deposited here much like the coins themselves. It's a stroke of luck, and I'm grateful for it. I yearn to peer outside, to gauge my distance along the coastline and assess the angle of the sun's descent. Yet my physical condition is dire. Standing is out of the question, and even crawling is an arduous feat. A gentle lap of water reaches my feet, soaking my legs and lower body. I haven't even had the chance to catch my breath, to contemplate the shattered state of my ankle, and already the tide is closing in. Logically, it follows. The sea placed me here, so of course it follows close behind. Damn it, I exclaim under my breath. This is the first moment since I stumbled upon the coins that my thoughts regain a sense of normalcy in their pace. I am in grave danger, and the window for my luck to hold out is still open. I check my pockets anxiously. My phone is rendered useless, a broken device. My lone source of light comes from a waterproof torch attached to my keychain, a Christmas present from my mother. She finds solace in my hobbies and insists it simplifies her gift shopping process. With a surge of astonishment, I turn on the torch, realizing that this will be its first use. The passage ahead is roughly waist-high, extending deeper than my torch's reach. The ocean surges behind me, frustrated by its escaped prey. Thankfully, the cave slopes upward a few meters ahead, so I begin crawling in search of higher ground. I haul myself off the flat rock and venture deeper into the cavern. Progress is slow as I traverse the collection of eroded gravel and miscellaneous debris that the water has accumulated over the years. Fishing gear, old nets, driftwood, and even a cat's skull. I can't help but pause at the sight of the feline skull. Its empty sockets seem to glare at me like a cautionary sign. I shake off the uneasy feeling and press onward. I'm losing ground in this race, I realize, as the water steadily creeps up to my belly. Damn it, damn it, damn it, damn it. I pull myself along, imitating the elbow-over-elbow movement from army advertisements. Be the best, I repeat like a mantra as my ankle snags on rocks and my ribs ache with each movement. I haven't cried like this since childhood, yet I persist. The water reaches my chest, and somewhere behind me, the cat's skull bobs on the rising tide. I'm determined not to join it. Finally, I reach a point where the terrain begins to slope upward. The darkness ahead offers a foreboding refuge, but it's my only shot at survival, and I cling to it. I dismiss my inner caveman, the fearful part of me, as it drums up all possible warnings in my mind. Regardless, I continue forging ahead. With painstaking effort, I make my way forward, arm over arm. I can't be sure of the distance covered, maybe a meter for every 10 minutes. I'm no athlete. When the upward tunnel becomes too steep for my elbows to gain traction, I grip onto cracks in the stone and use them to pull myself forward. Meanwhile, the water continues its ascent. Its icy chill reaches my collarbones, and I can't help but let out an audible cry. I don't want to die. The thought terrifies me, particularly the idea of the pain. How agonizing is drowning, I ponder. Is it less tormenting than this? I wish I could weigh the pros and cons of letting go, sliding back into the water. But my mind won't allow it. It's all or nothing. Ancient instincts push me forward. Struggling to keep my chin above water as it inches to my bottom lip, I fail to notice the ground's shift in direction. Suddenly it dips downward, and my hands flail instinctively. I wish I could pause and assess the path ahead, but it's far too late. The combination of gravity and the water's force carries me over the edge. For a fleeting moment I feel weightless, and then darkness consumes everything. For the second time that day, consciousness slips away. Upon awakening, I find myself lying on my stomach, engulfed in intense pain. Strangely, amidst this agony, I manage to summon a spark of anger directed at the world. It's as if this suffering has become personal, and that surge of frustration oddly empowers me to raise my head and assess my surroundings. Fortunately, my torch remains secured to my wrist, allowing me to illuminate the space. I discover that I am within a cavern that accommodates my standing height. Nearby, a crevice in the rock serves as a drainage point for water, a stroke of luck that prevented me from drowning. Behind me lies the path I had taken earlier, an almost vertical rock wall, 10 meters tall, covered in slippery algae and smoothed by countless waves over millennia. Climbing it would be as impossible as scaling the Empire State Building. I observe as another wave summits the wall, crashing down upon me like a hurled bucket of water. Adjacent to that crevice, water is gradually filling, its backwash eagerly lapping at my feet. Remaining here means almost certain drowning within an hour. Nonetheless, this isn't a death trap, at least not yet. The cave extends onward, an additional tunnel reaching chest height and sufficiently wide to crawl through. It curves gently beyond my sight, but something about the darkness ahead unsettles me. Despite the uncertainty, perhaps the tunnel ends after a mere meter. My only option is to proceed. Resolutely, I press forward, crawling around the bend. The passage initially seems safe, yet it progressively narrows. I attempt to suppress my growing unease. Lying flat on my stomach, I initially have room to spare as the ceiling gradually descends, from 6 to 5 and then to 4 feet. When it brushes against my shoulder blades, I struggle to quell the rising urge to hyperventilate. However, it's not solely the ceiling that inches closer. The walls on either side also inch in, constricting my arm movements, and panic sets in. I hope against hope that the walls will widen any moment, but they stubbornly maintain their pressure. Relentlessly, they close in on me. I desire to turn back, yet the water is already at knee level. Attempting to retreat, I realize I'm trapped. This understanding seems to drain the world of its color, though I try not to dwell on its implications. I persist, unknowingly extending my arms forward until the walls narrow so drastically that I can no longer bend my elbows. Movement is now confined to the motion of my wrists and one functional ankle. If progress had been sluggish before, it's now torturous. Time practically stands still as I wage war against my own entrapment. Seconds blur into hours as I battle against my confines, my right hand's fingers toiling while my left foot pushes me onward mere centimeters at a time. Out of nowhere, panic strikes like a sledgehammer. I'm immobilized. In a frenzy, I attempt to thrash about, but it's more akin to a seizure. My wrists and ankles flail, searching for any hint of leverage, yet there's none to be found. While rational thinking should be my priority, most of my mental capacity is consumed by this fight against panic. My emotions reach a breaking point and I begin sobbing aloud, accompanied by a stream of curses. Soon a heightened awareness emerges. My ability to inhale fully is compromised by the tunnel's constricting pressure on my ribs. The stone is unwaveringly rigid. Every breath is shallow, and the urgency for oxygen intensifies, prompting me to breathe more rapidly in a desperate attempt to stave off the encroaching suffocation. All I yearn for is a single deep breath, a longing that remains unfulfilled. With each struggle, the need for air grows more desperate. I'm ensnared in a downward spiral that feels inexorably lethal. This situation represents the utmost worst-case scenario, a realization that has fully dawned on me. I had previously thought that drowning would have been a preferable fate. It seems inconceivable that anything could surpass the misery of my current predicament. My desire alternates between wanting to lose consciousness and wishing for death, yet neither of these outcomes materializes. The world around me takes on a disoriented quality, a slight wavering of reality. Momentarily, a wave of dizziness engulfs me. Nevertheless, the circumstances remain unaltered. Thus, I am compelled to confront my fear head-on. While I may not be able to conquer it, I can, at the very least, study it closely. I am left with limited options. Both the cave and I are inescapable entities, so I redirect my attention to the sensations of lightheadedness, the discomfort in my chest, and the immense pressure from the earth above and below me. My heart is racing with such rapidity that it feels as though it might suddenly cease functioning. I center my focus on its rhythm, meticulously counting each beat as if it were a percussive pattern. Slowly, almost inadvertently, this heightened state of awareness manages to alleviate some of the panic's grip. It's akin to an out-of-body experience, although I remain firmly within my own body. I am acutely conscious of every restriction, every bind, every ache, and every pain. At long last, a new sensation becomes apparent. By exhaling, the rock's vice-like grip on me somewhat loosens. If I expel my breath and sustain that state of breathlessness, the sensation of confinement becomes marginally more bearable. This small relief stands as the sole physical comfort I have experienced since this ordeal began. In a sudden moment of clarity, I regain control over the situation. It seems so obvious now. I exhale and withhold my breath, then make a minute movement with my foot. My body responds. Encouraged, I repeat the action, each time inching forward. I repeat this process perhaps 50 or 100 times in total. Ultimately, I manage to traverse what I believe to be about a meter, and then, miraculously, the rock gives way. Tears stream from my eyes like those of an infant. The ability to breathe fully returns to me, a deep, unhindered breath. The tunnel widens further. Before I realize it, my arms are free at my sides, and I utilize my elbows to drag myself onward. Gradually, the tunnel no longer scrapes against my shoulder blades. No rock hampers my progress. I emerge headfirst and pull myself out of the tunnel, dropping several feet onto a rugged floor below. Rolling onto my back, I burst into laughter. It's a laughter that is wild, unhinged, and utterly unique in my life experience. Overwhelmed by an immense happiness, tears of joy streaming down my face, I survey my surroundings, preparing for the next stage of this nightmare. To my astonishment, a man stands before me, a smile on his face. "Jesus fucking Christ," I cry out, scrambling away in alarm. Involuntarily, my movement results in a kick to his face, causing his head to loll backward, almost as if he's attempting to laugh. His mouth is a gruesome mess, devoid of eyes and teeth. His smile, far from being one of amusement, conveys a grotesque semblance of the Joker's grin. Frightened, I shuffle closer and hesitantly extend a hand to touch him, a swift prod to his shoulder. There is no response from him. It takes several more pokes before I finally convince myself of his lifelessness. A sense of numbing dread washes over me as reality reasserts itself. This is indeed a lifeless body, I remind myself. In the stark beam of my flashlight, his face appears pallid, but a brief touch to his forehead confirms that he still holds warmth. And that windbreaker, it triggers a memory. I summon an image of the elderly man I encountered on the beach. He had been wearing a jacket strikingly similar to this one. However, I dismiss the notion that this could be him. It's simply inconceivable. I perceive this location as a nightmarish realm I contemplate, an authentic netherworld of reality. As I survey my surroundings, I endeavor to conjure an understanding of the origin of this lifeless body before me. An array of peculiar objects is huddled against the distant wall. I approach and sift through them, yet their impact is akin to the gold coin. My thoughts congeal and become sluggish. I inventory the items like a simpleton, incapable and unwilling to grasp the broader context. 6 coats, 15 shoes, innumerable hats and gloves, all of them frayed or torn in some manner. 3 backpacks, exercise books from a school, now transformed into mulch long ago. A pencil case filled with soft pencils and fractured pens. I release the final item to the ground and pivot my light across the space behind me. Discomfort settles within me. My thoughts race through various possibilities. Suddenly, I scrutinize this confined space as though my survival hinges on it, driven by an urgency to address a question that supersedes all others. Perhaps I should have heeded the advice of that primitive individual, I ponder. It's plausible that I am not the sole occupant of this subterranean realm. Words are etched onto the wall. The script is unfamiliar to me, yet it instills fear. Paragraphs of text are meticulously scrawled in orderly blocks, one after the other. Periodically, these are interspersed with rudimentary depictions of ships and spear-wielding figures. If it narrates a tale, I am unable to decipher its meaning. Nonetheless, something about the scene perturbs me. The lifeless body, the heap of forsaken belongings, an archaic language. I arrest myself from plunging into a full-fledged panic, by reminding myself that these particulars are inconsequential. My paramount objective is to exit this place by any means necessary. Multiple tunnels lead away from this chamber, all noticeably more expansive than the previous one. I arbitrarily select one. Hopefully, it proves to be more reliable than the preceding tunnel I crawled through. Suppressing the pain, I hoist myself onto my hands and knees. The agony is intense, but it facilitates my swift and silent departure. I scuttle along, offering a final sorrowful glance at the lifeless body. The elderly man is observing me. His grin endures, and I am relieved to move the light away and create distance between us. Whether this path ultimately leads to an exit or not, I am grateful that it remains expansively open. At certain junctures, it accommodates the passage of 2 or 3 individuals side by side. I have never before appreciated such spaciousness. Mere hours ago, this expanse would have felt as cramped as a crowded elevator. Now it resembles an empty stadium. It affords me the luxury of halting to catch my breath, as well as the opportunity to forge ahead and make progress. Either action can be pursued at my discretion. Minutes slip away in the obscurity, where time holds no sway. During lengthy stretches, I extinguish the flashlight and rely on sound and touch to guide me, using echoes to discern abrupt changes in the tunnel's trajectory. This is something I would have adamantly claimed to be beyond my capacity earlier in the day. Yet it proves surprisingly manageable. On multiple occasions, I discern variations in an otherwise uniform soundscape, causing me to halt and illuminate my flashlight to reveal a sharp bend to the right or left. I am acquiring a competence that engenders a flicker of hope. However, this self-assurance wanes upon encountering a fork in the tunnel. For an instant, indecision ensnares me, but then a familiar sight catches my eye. A gold coin rests there, another one, immaculate, much like the one on the shore. This time it fails to elate me. No mental images of sunken chests arise, only the eerie grin of the pallid cadaver I abandoned, and the ominous words etched into stone. The world feels oppressive, bearing down from above, and I am minute and solitary in this place. The darkness envelops me entirely, verging on suffocation. I fixate on the coin, on its placement within a tunnel that veers sharply to the left and disappears from view. It unsettles me. I am disconcerted by its positioning. Taking it would situate me precisely at the threshold of the unseen. While I possess scant certainty in this subterranean realm, my instincts, inherently risk-averse like those of prey, lead me to conclude that the coin is a snare. It's almost audacious in its simplicity, not subtle. My eyes widen, and the scent of blood lingers in my nostrils. A twitching hair, ears perked up. I sense that whatever set this trap is near enough to perceive each breath I take. A gossamer thin boundary of perception alone separates me from death. Right there before me lies the trap. It anticipates my fall into its snare. Regrettably, I recognize that I've already taken the bait. I'm now 2 coins deep into this horrifying ordeal. The trap was set meticulously right from the outset. My solitary hope is that I am not like a vulnerable hare, easily ensnared. My ability to think beyond mere actions and reactions might provide an advantage, yet speed is of the essence. I weigh my alternatives. Should I make my awareness of its presence known if something is indeed there? Perhaps every ambush must ultimately unveil itself. Opting for control, I conclude that it's wiser. I discover a suitable rock, they're plentiful. Slowly and cautiously I retreat from the fork, finding a ridge within the stone walls to conceal myself behind. It's a small refuge that offers limited shelter, but it's the best available, and I hope it will suffice. With a flick of my thumb, the light extinguishes. Clutching the stone in my hand, I squeeze into my hiding spot and hold my breath. Just in the nick of time, the stone collides with the wall of the right-hand tunnel. This is the path without the coin. Silence ensues, lasting perhaps 5, maybe 10 seconds. Then a barely audible sound emerges, the faintest of contacts against the stone. Such a contrast to the synthetic realm of engines and droning motors to which I'm accustomed. I've trained my entire life to ignore these subtle, almost imperceptible rustlings. The footsteps of a cat, the fluttering of a bird's wings, the skittering of a rat. Yet here, the sound reverberates like thunder. It sends shivers down my spine and sets my scalp's hairs on end. A part of me tossed the stone expecting to prove myself wrong, but now the terror is tangible, almost graspable. It's as real as the wall I'm fervently attempting to dissolve into, as palpable as my own flesh and blood. I am the quarry in this grim hunt. Whatever lurked hidden has seemingly fallen for the bait. The noise of its movement fades into the recesses of the right-hand tunnel. Thank the ancient instincts of that caveman. He remembers the strategy. Acting on raw intuition and acutely aware of the ticking clock, I summon the courage to peer around the rocky outcrop and illuminate my flashlight. There, once again, is the fork. Any lingering doubts about the trap's existence crumble when I find the golden coin gone. No further time is squandered as I scramble down that path on all fours, pausing only briefly to contemplate if my pursuer has executed a double bluff. Ah well, I think, the moment has passed. Around the bend I go, plunging into darkness. All that greets me is an abyss. From time to time I halt and glance over my shoulder for signs of a chase. If it took the bait and followed the incorrect tunnel, who's to say it didn't swiftly realize the ruse and is now hot on my heels? Or perhaps the tunnels intersect further ahead. If a resident occupies this domain, it must be intimately familiar with the sprawling labyrinthine layout. I am but a visitor in these shadowed recesses, utterly lost and ill-prepared for this survivalist nightmare. Yet each time I look back, the void is unoccupied, an eerily sterile expanse looming above me as I crawl on my hands and knees. The walls of stone curve and jaggedly protrude, ribbed and rippled, resembling a concrete colon where light's reach is finite. At each juncture I muster the strength to avert my gaze from the abyss and continue my odyssey. I repeat this action 16 times, uncertain of the intervals between each instance. My focus is solely on the count, until eventually the unending tunnel provides respite, and I find myself transported to yet another expansive chamber. This time, the radiance it exudes nearly blinds me. Temporarily, I tilt my head upward, anticipating a light bulb, only to be met with a hole in the ceiling. A feeble glimmer of sunlight filters through, yet after enduring hours of pitch-black darkness, it's akin to staring directly into the sun. The exit is indiscernible in the distance, the view of the sky beyond obstructed. I cannot discern if it's day or night up there, though the proximity of the sky is undeniable, so close. The aperture itself hovers just above me. Using my flashlight, I spot an ancient corroded ladder embedded in the stone. Climbing it in my injured state won't be easy, but given the limited options, I must find a way. After hours, I stand on my feet once more. The act of reaching upwards sends waves of pain from my chest to my toes. Fractured ribs grate against each other, a swollen ankle throbs, transmitting pain through numbed nerves that recently only conveyed static. It's so intense that my heart seems to pause, or at least skip a beat. This must be the kind of stress that can fell even healthy individuals, and my health is far from optimal. Before my elbow even reaches shoulder level, I'm forced to gasp for air, and the fragile equilibrium collapses. Crumbling, I collapse onto the ground, the impact causing more pain than I could have imagined. Suddenly I'm questioning whether I possess the determination to ascend that pitted, rusty ladder. A scream pierces the air close by. The room, like the one preceding it, offers numerous entrances and exits. The walls bear inscriptions, pictograms depicting an enigmatic entity with the head of an angler, worshipped by ant-sized men. My flashlight casts eerie shadows on all these images, yet nothing leaps out at me. This realization settles in. This is the singular opportunity I'll receive. How many chances must I have, I inwardly query. Just one, I whisper. With sheer willpower, I haul myself upright, before my nerves can fully register the impending surge of agony that threatens to overwhelm me. I manage to hop on one foot. It's sufficient to bring me within reach of the ladder, and with a single swinging arm I clutch onto it desperately. Then the other arm follows suit until I'm gripping it for dear life, feet hovering a mere inch above the ground, tears streaming down my cheeks. This already feels like an insurmountable feat, yet before I can entertain surrender, another scream echoes through the air, so near that I can't help but envision the entity lurking in the darkness, eager to finally close in on me. Fate seems to toy with this last thought. Still swaying, my gaze darting between the various tunnel openings, I catch a fleeting glimpse of movement, something hurtling toward me. It's vaguely human in that unsettling manner that often characterizes the monsters in our nightmares. My own scream, or something akin to it, escapes my lips. It's a rapid, staccato yelp, driven by the sudden activation of my muscles as I find myself in the midst of performing a pull-up. With my legs flailing frantically, I manage to haul myself upward until the first rung aligns with my chest, allowing me to reach for the next one above. The pain in my chest recedes to a throbbing ache. In a foolish attempt, I test my injured ankle to support my ascent, only to realize that the pain is too excruciating to bear any weight on the broken bone. Another cry escapes me and I shift my approach. Relying on my arms to lift my weight, I utilize my one functional foot for stability. Under different circumstances, this would be challenging yet manageable. However, with the memory of that creature closing in on me, the situation is turned into a form of torment. A sense of hopelessness floods over me, accompanied by intense pain and needless suffering. Yet I've gleaned something crucial in the past few hours. The human body operates on its own autopilot, detached from the conscious mind. My arms move instinctively, propelling me up one rung at a time, a pace too swift for rational thinking. Injuries accumulate, abrasions, a bumped head, each upward movement causing me to awkwardly collide with the nearly invisible rocks. Instinct is the one steering, but it seems content to leave me to grapple with the consequences of its impulsive decisions. I feel every ache and pang, every sting of a wound tainted with grit, every ligament pulled taut to its limit. Strangely, I find solace in this arrangement. Survival is my driving force. I'm grateful for the primal instinct within me that takes charge in moments like these, especially when I dare to steal a glance downward, only to meet the gaze of pitch-black eyes staring up at me, brimming with thoughtless elation. The sheer humanity of that face astounds me. I had anticipated something more insect-like, perhaps even resembling a spider. Regardless of what lurks beneath me, whether it's a hybrid or some mutated entity, it's repulsive and rapidly closing the gap. The trembling of the ladder informs me that it's ascending as well. I strive to climb faster, but every ounce of my being is already engaged. There's no reserve left. Reluctantly, I shift my gaze downward again, and there it is, even nearer now. Its grinning, rubbery mouth displays a set of glassy teeth. I despise it. My injured foot lashes out involuntarily, inflicting more harm on myself. The agony is so intense that I'm compelled to halt my ascent and succumb to tears. It's in that very moment that I feel claws sinking into the hot, swollen flesh of my calf. An agonizing cry escapes me, an expulsion that empties my lungs and etches a deep scar into my soul. I'll carry the sensation of this scream with me until my last breath. It marks the instant when despair overpowers me, the instant when hope fades away, succumbing to a seizure induced by the torment, rendering my fingers numb and my limbs limp. The last image I retain as I plummet is of an iron grate above me, merely 10 or 20 meters distant. I glimpse a figure, perhaps a man, stationed there, directing a beam of light downward. He speaks words I can't discern. I convince myself that it's a hallucination, nothing more, and then I'm in free fall. My head connects with a rocky outcrop. A crunch reverberates beneath me. Darkness. I regain consciousness in a hospital bed, a sensation in my chest reminiscent of warfare. Instinctively, I thrash from side to side, grasping a nearby table and dragging it across the floor, poised to wield it as a makeshift weapon. A nurse in the corner flinches, unaware that I'm locked in a battle for my life, or at least that's how it feels. Gradually, I blink away the harsh halogen light, taking in my surroundings. The imagery of combat recedes, replaced by the reality of where I am. The floodgates open, and tears stream down uncontrollably. Warm arms envelop me. I can't identify the person, but it doesn't matter. I cling to them desperately, my grip so intense that they utter words to someone nearby, sounding something like, "Oh God, he's hurting me." A flurry of hurried movements follows, then a needle, and once again, darkness takes over. Hours, perhaps days later, I awaken to the presence of my mother and a police officer nearby. This time, I manage to suppress the rising panic as my senses return. Finally, I'm given the account of my rescue. They had been searching tirelessly for me, and by chance, they heard my voice near the old storm drain. Within minutes, they descended on ropes and discovered me lying there, battered and bleeding. Oddly, they remark, I sustained no major injuries from the fall itself. A bumped head and a fractured wrist from the descent, but considering the height, I should have suffered far worse. Something, I speculate, must have cushioned my fall. I burst into laughter, a wild, unrestrained sound. My mother looks concerned, understandably so. After all, I was trapped down there for over 24 hours, though it felt like mere moments to me. I try to explain this phenomenon to them, how time warps in the darkness, and they nod as if comprehending, though deep down I know they can't truly fathom it. It takes another hour before I realize I'm missing a leg. This puzzles them as much as it perplexes me. Discrepancies in the nature of the wound. An expert stands by, attempting to elucidate, but their words sound distant and hollow. I'm taken aback by the sight of the neatly bandaged stump. Evidently, considerable surgery was required to tidy it up. Despite everything, anger surges within me. I believed I was dead. This should seem like a small price to pay, yet the knowledge that a part of me became sustenance for that monstrosity churns my stomach. Nausea threatens to overwhelm me. Somewhere down there, a piece of me dissolves within stomach acid, destined to be excreted in some foul corner of the creature's den. As tears stream down and I unleash shouts of impotent fury, they're forced to sedate me again. They attribute it to simple shock, but it's more complex than that. A profound hatred consumes me, difficult to articulate. Months pass and I find myself penning this narrative, an attempt to expel that venomous sentiment. Throughout this period, a pervasive sense of unfinished business haunts me. Whenever I falter with my prosthetic, stumble or forget it's there momentarily, the rage flares anew. Every night I endure hours of agony from phantom pains, endeavoring to soothe an injured mind through the medium of a mirror. Sometimes I think I'd have preferred death if it meant slaying that abomination. All my weight, plummeting steeply, I envision myself obliterating it, leaving behind a grotesque, shattered mess. This level of enmity is entirely new to me. Clearly, I'm not alone in this sentiment. One morning, a knock resonates on the door of my caravan. It takes me an excessive amount of time to prepare myself. I'm still unskilled with the prosthetic, struggling to put it on and take it off. Nearly 20 minutes elapse before I'm ready to face the world. Since my rescue, my disposition has darkened, and I practically kick the door open with a roar, prepared to unleash my wrath on whoever disturbs me. To my surprise, no one stands there, only silence, and yet another gold coin.